Casting my mind back to 2012, me and two of my friends, one of which I haven't seen in years, sat down to watch The Avengers. The excitement was high as the three of us at the time were casual comic book fans, still in high school. We had all been eagerly anticipating the film since the previous few years had been a steady build-up for a grand climax. Of course, when you look back, I think as early as the Phase 1 days, the MCU had always had missteps. The strange second half of Iron Man 2 with Tony Stark cures his palladium poisoning by building a triangle-shaped arc reactor. I guess the circle one didn't cut it. The first Thor film, while inspired by the high-concept fantasy stories of Jack Kirby, reduced to a fish-out-of-water comedy with Thor stumbling around a New Mexico desert, plus some lackluster villains. All of these are some of the similar muddy problems that the latter years of the MCU have been plagued with. But back then, at least in my teenage mind, it didn't seem to matter much. My earliest memories of Marvel adaptations was in the 90s Spider-Man and X-Men shows. Seeing these shows as a very young child, it didn't seem to bother me that the plots were virtually incomprehensible at times. Even going back and watching them as an adult, I'm not entirely sure what some of the plots of these episodes were about. But it never bothered me. Still doesn't, in fact. They were about fantastical characters who looked larger than life. Their lives were just more interesting, more entertaining, more bizarre than I or anyone I knew could possibly relate to. I think that's always been the appeal of comic book characters, the ability to go beyond what normal people can do. The same appeal was found in the early years of the MCU, as there was in the old Fox Kids shows, which in turn had been transplanted from the zany world of 1960s comics that proved the source from the river from which all else flowed. In that case, why is it that the latter years of the MCU, in fact the latter years for Marvel more generally, just hasn't been received with the same level of excitement? Needless to say, seeing the first Avengers film on the big screen was one of the highlights of my cinema-going experience. I remember the excitement the three of us felt watching all of this come together and the nerd pride I felt knowing I was perhaps the only person in the screening who knew who Thanos was in the mid-credits scene. What if the reason for the malaise is simply because we've changed? A lot of us have moved on from 2008 to 2019. Marvel was on a roll. A cinematic universe had never been attempted on this scale. The characters felt alive, storylines spanned several years, and the stakes naturally increased over time. My generation was in the perfect place to enjoy this. Much of the core audience was kids, teenagers, students, or young adults who had the time to invest in a massive journey. But post-2019, Marvel tried to build on the insurmountable scales previously established. In the end, fans started to feel tired. Jobs, families, burnout. The investment just wasn't there. Plus, the same audience that enjoyed this has grown more diverse in its movie palette. There might be more interest in other genres, smaller, more relatable stories. The younger audience is now the ones that didn't grow up with the MCU and are consequently less invested. Now, when a new character first appears, rather than feeling invested, now it just feels like homework rather than entertainment. The post-Endgame box office has been rocky and inconsistent to say the least. Ant-Man, the Marvels, the Eternals all underperformed. Critics were supportive, but more audiences didn't show up. Superhero fatigue may have played a role in this, but it's also a need to concentrate on other aspects of our lives. So am I right about the MCU? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button, subscribe. This has been TheCine-Prince, and I'll see you next time.